got to remember that the company is, for something that somebody does, an employee does at a work event, the business becomes vicariously responsible for it.
Closing out on the research itself, it did point out that situations that are social and involve alcohol are particularly high risk.
Risk assessment, absolutely. So the risk assessment has to be the top one.
Like it or not, it's what we as directors, especially in the Companies Act, but now increasingly managers in some of these acts, have duties to do.
The onus is on the businesses to actually change their cultures and to put things into practice.
Weather's getting better. Starting to think about holidays now. Is it too soon for that?
I've just been on holiday.
You've just been on holiday?
I've just been to Athens for a few days.
Oh, I'm going to Athens later on in the
Are
day.
you really?
Yeah, just going sailing there. Yeah. What was it like?
Okay, lovely. Unfortunately, talking about the weather, we actually had worse weather than was in Shrewsbury.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is a bit of a shame. But Athens is great. Have you been before?
Yeah, a long time ago.
So it's not like Rome or Paris or London even, where there's a huge amount to do and different things around every corner. It's very much sort of a living, breathing city, rather than, some of these bigger places you go, big cities where it feels almost like a museum half the time you're walking around. Yeah. They have very specific and limited, very important archaeological sites, but it's not really hugely geared up to tourists. We stayed in Plaka, which is very much a tourist district, and it's beautiful. But I felt like the 3 or so days that we had there was good enough, and we did it. Yeah, we won at Athens. Yeah.
I think I'm only going to be there for a day before I go off to get on a boat and sail around the islands.
Lovely.
I've just had an email this morning from EasyJet from another trip, cancelling my flight. And it hardly ever happens, and I guess that's just what can happen. I did wonder whether it might be related to Middle East troubles and all that sort of thing at the moment. But just cancel the flight, saying it's up to you. You can book another one, or I'll give you the refund. And you think, hang on a minute, I got all my plans around the timing of that flight.
Yes, I've had it. Well, I can't remember where we're going now. EasyJet again, but I booked through Apodo, I think it was, and we went up to get it all sorted. I couldn't check in the night before, but it didn't explain why. The app was being odd. Weird happened, and then we just didn't have the tickets, and we'd rather cancelled them. They just cancelled our tickets, so we had to buy
and you
fresh.
Hadn't picked up on it.
No indication.
Gosh. Yeah. Well, let's hope it all gets sorted out anyway. But I'm glad you had a nice trip.
Thank you very much.
Shall we do a podcast?
Let's do that.
Okay. Hello and welcome to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. Thanks for joining us again. Every week we try and come up with something interesting and new or useful for owners and managers of small and medium-sized businesses. And normally it's Richard and I holding forth on some topic or another, but every now and again we're very lucky to have guests come into the studio. And today's guest has been here before.
I have, yes.
Hello, Andrea.
I've been in the office many times.
You've been in the office many times. Andrea Miller. Andrea used to work here many years ago before you went solo, contracting all on your own, or exciting running your own business. We'll have to talk about that one day as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And you last came in here, and it made me realise how well the podcast has lasted, because the last episode you guested on was episode 39.
Yes.
And today we're on episode 168.
Impressive, yeah.
So it tells you it's nearly 3 years ago.
It doesn't feel that long.
I know. Yeah. Well, 130 odd episodes ago.
Yeah.
So there you go. 2.5 years anyway. So, and then you came in because I think it had something to do with the Women's Football World Cup.
Yes,
and
Hermosa,
that's right. Was it the Spanish
inappropriate kiss
had been kissed on the lips
manager,
by the president of the
FIFA
or UEFA or
something. Yeah.
Details escape me, but anyway, we talked all about that, and it's funny enough, just as it happens, that links to today's topic. But before we get onto that and give you a full intro, I'm going to just run through what our last 3 episodes were. A bit of tradition we've kept going now for the last however many. So, like I said just now, this is episode 168. And we've had a rush of guests now. You're the third guest in a row.
My goodness.
I
feel less special now.
Well, I would say we normally have guests no more than 1 in 4 episodes, maybe less.
Yeah.
But they do tend to come in clusters around the holiday periods.
Okay.
So I was off a couple of weeks ago. Richard's off this week.
Yes.
So we use that as an opportunity to invite guests in.
Yeah.
Anyway, so last week we had Ian. Ian came in and talked about... 2 things really. The bit I was interested in was his sailing. because he sailed single-handed round the world, non-stop, unassisted,
Wow.
on the something called the Golden Globe race, following in the footsteps of Robin Knox-Johnson when he first time it was ever done. It was in 1969. And so he talked about that, and it all ended in the ship sinking and him being rescued and all that sort of stuff. So he has all that history. But also he has a career before that built on startups in the software industry and being a software sales guy and selling businesses and so on.
Oh,
so that's what he was really here to talk about.
Yes,
but I was more interested in the sailing bits because of what I do. And the week before that, we had Tom Meehan in, who's my personal trainer.
Oh, okay.
Say mine, you
have been.
I think I share him with many others. He's the personal trainer for a group of lads that get together twice a week, and we'll do circuit training on each other's drives, followed by food provided by the host, which is very good. Yeah. So Tom came in, and he talked, and he has a gym in town, which is a High Rocks gym, and so I was interested in the fact that he'd built a business around a fad. A trend. High Rocks is a thing that's only been around. It's first invented in 2019. It's all quite new. It's a bit like CrossFit, but it's the next generation of that. It's competitive fitness events. Right. And there must be 10 a month around the world. And they have thousands. The one this weekend coming is in London, I think. 50,000 people will be there.
My goodness.
Incredible. Yep. So anyway, I was interested that he'd built a business around the fact that High Rocks is currently all over Instagram and YouTube if you're into that sort of thing. And, it's very much a fad. What will happen if in 5 years' time the next new thing is taken over and I'm not talking about it? So he talked about that and how he tried to make his business resilient towards those sort of changes in trend. And the one before that was Richard and me. And we were talking, there was a bit of research in a Harvard Business Review about when is it good for a manager to be hands-on. A lot of the advice is that owners of businesses, especially managers, need to be quite hands-off. Yeah. Everybody else get on with it. Don't get in the way.
Micromanagement is a dirty word.
Exactly. But there are some occasions when being a bit more hands-on is useful, especially if it means you are more connected to customer need and if you've got an insight into what makes for a good process. Don't necessarily do the work, but understand the big process. And it's a bit like when they have that CEO sort of boss back to the floor thing that they sometimes do TV things on. So you just go back and see what it's really like from a customer's perspective.
Yes.
So there were some of the angles we explored in that one. Mm-hmm. So you're feeling you should have watched those now?
Obviously I did, yeah.
But what triggered today's one, and I'm going to give credit here to a colleague, contact friend of mine called Kathy from HR Champions down in Gloucester. Right. We were at a meeting recently, and she drew my attention to two things when we were discussing another business's issue of the day, which was all quite involved and detailed, which I won't go into here. But she first pointed out that there was a study released right in COVID that most of us missed, but it was really quite important. Yes. And it was to do with sexual harassment in the workplace. Yes. Came up with some interesting findings. Yes. And that then informed a new law that came into force in October, which I don't think I'm alone in not knowing an awful lot about it.
Okay, yeah.
And it wasn't, I'm maybe not reading the right newsletters or whatever, but the new duties that are on managers and directors around sexual harassment. Yeah. And there's more to come. Yeah. So I wanted to start, if you don't mind, with the research bit.
Yes.
And just see what we can do out of that and what we can learn from that. And just maybe reflect a little bit on it. And and the reason we delayed this, Rich and I were going to do this a couple of weeks ago. But he said, because one of the findings in it was that the worst companies are those that are managed by over 50-year-old men. We thought, I think he's not quite 50 yet, but he's nearly there. And I'm over 50-year-old men sitting talking about sexual harassment in the workplace when our demographic is apparently...
that's a little bit unfair to you.
Well, I'd like to think we're not all tarred with the same brush.
Absolutely.
But we didn't think it would come across with the right vibe about it. So we thought, we need to get Andrea in for this one. And forgetting that we'd done the Hermosa Kiss one 130 episodes ago. Yes. We realised how predictable we are.
With a different angle, obviously. But the survey, I suppose, to summarise it, it was shocking but not surprising.
Yes. We put some numbers on some anecdotes.
Yeah. So 29% of staff said that they had been harassed in the last 12 months.
And that was the shocking bit, the 12-month bit. If you say in your career, 29% would still be shocking, right? But 29% every year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think of their career, and it was sort of broken down into age differences, particularly for women, then it was over 50% of most women, but 29% in the last 12 months. And again, unsurprisingly, it's mostly women, but it also reported that there were significantly larger numbers of men reporting sexual harassment.
And that shouldn't take away from the headline, clearly. But being a man, I couldn't but help look upon that with some shock, because the fact that 50% of women report having sexual harassment in a year is terrible, horrible and shocking, and as you say, maybe not surprising, but puts a number on it. Yeah. What did surprise me was the percentage that came out of men, because it was nearly 20%.
Yeah.
So 1 in 5 men also say they've experienced sexual harassment in the last year. And of course,
sexual harassment can come from either sex, so men against men.
Could be a men doing
against
women
against men. And absolutely. So very, very shocking, and such a time. And because the new law came in October 24, I have done a lot of training with different businesses around it, and it always feels a little bit sad that actually we're having to still do that, and that these numbers are enforced.
When did the Equality Act come in? And that isn't even when it started, is
it? So? No, Equality Act was 2010, and that obviously was a proceeding from, I think it was 1975, was it the previous version? It was shocking about the numbers, about how many people did experience it. It also revealed that a lot of it's not reported. So I think there was a big sort of disparity between what people were saying in this survey as to actually what sort of claims were being brought, or how companies said that they had complaints or grievances
or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
hidden aspect of it was.
I guess it's a bit like the National Crime Survey, where not all crimes are picked up in the statistics, but people still say they experience crime, but don't report it.
But don't, absolutely.
And I think there's a fear of it not being dealt with. There's a power imbalance that they refer to in the study, don't they?
Yeah, very much so. And that people are afraid of retaliation. And actually one of the measures that's coming in very shortly, so April 6th of this year, sexual harassment is becoming a protected disclosure under the Whistleblowing Act.
Oh, and it wasn't until now?
No.
That's interesting as well.
It had been previously, I believe. I'm getting confused. That's the third party aspect that's coming in later in the year. But yes, it basically means that there's no detriment to those who, or discrimination against those who actually do disclose sexual harassment. Yeah. Which is, it's a big step forward, and hopefully that will change that statistic around reporting.
If it's covered on, but whistleblowing still has its own challenges, doesn't it? Because despite the protections, still people are not
despite the protections, you're still working with those people. So one of the protections is that you won't be dismissed because of disclosing it, but you still have to work with the people that you've made the allegations against potentially. Depending on who they are and what the action is against them. So it's very complicated, and that's why and it came out in the survey. And what's then the impact on these people who do suffer from sexual harassment at work? And people do leave their jobs because it becomes untenable to work there. People suffer from depression. People that aren't promoted, they sort of hide away. It impacts their careers. They have, have some serious mental health issues arising from it. So it is a very, it's something that businesses really need to consider. It doesn't make for a very pleasant
workplace or an efficient workplace either, does it?
No.
So whatever level, and clearly that's the least of our concerns. It should be more about all these other things you talk about. But there is a really commercial aspect to this as well. Even if you are really thick-skinned and 70s in your thinking, it's just not a good thing to have going on. It's going to distract people and change the way people work and all sorts. Yeah. And just to pick up some of the things it pointed out that were included in what's called sexual harassment, like you say, it isn't all touching or even worse, where it's a physical element to it. It could just be jokes around it or unwanted flirting, let's say, and that sort of thing, or inappropriate messaging, especially these days with messaging on WhatsApp.
And absolutely. So it covers physical, obviously, but also verbal and non-verbal. And the definition of harassment is that it's unwanted conduct, and interestingly, that has the effect, the purpose or the effect. So the effect part is really important, of causing then I forget all the terms that come into it, but a workplace that's that's not conducive.
And they say it's particularly prevalent in certain sectors, and hospitality is one in particular where
absolutely.
It's
And one of the points that came out of the survey actually was that it doesn't tend to be individual, it's cultural. So again, it's really points towards how much what the onus is on the businesses to actually change their cultures and to put things into practice. So the changes that came in October 24 changed how companies need to view protection of sexual harassment, not from being reactive as they were previously, but being preventative.
Yeah. So let's come on to that then, because just closing out on the research itself, it did point out that situations that are social and involve alcohol are particularly high risk.
Yes.
And it just made me, and this particular case that we were discussing, Kathy and I, with another business, really drove home to me how much of a minefield this is, especially when companies are trying to do, quote unquote, the right thing by providing, out of work, wind down sort of experiences for their colleagues and just get to know each other.
Yeah, businesses want to do that, don't they?
And this particular one was also further complicated by the fact that it was a woman complainant, but prior to the event which was complained about, she had been a participant in a broader group where this was all going on. So there was a really fine line in the definition as to if the recipient of unwanted behaviour, and as per your definition earlier, decides that what previously had been accepted by them now is no longer accepted by them, that line when that happens isn't always very clear.
Yes.
And it's certainly not always clear to everybody else who might be still using the fact that, that's how you've been carrying on in the past, so you just give as good as you get type of thing. Yeah. And then suddenly this new sort of way of judging it takes over.
Yes, and tribunals do assess if it's reasonable for the complainant to believe that it was unwanted conduct or that the conduct had that impact. So it's not just as simple as that he looked at me in a way that made me feel uncomfortable. Is it reasonable that he was just looking at you? It's that type of thing. So there is that it's not, it's very, I think, I say that because it's very scary for employers, because obviously the tribunal awards can be hefty. They're uncapped and there are different elements to them. And now there's a 25% uplift. We'll come on to that in terms of what the changes have been.
Okay,
recently.
so in a roundabout way, or maybe more directly than I realised, that survey then led to this new law, which is an amendment of prior law, the Equality Act. Yeah. So tell us a bit about that. Give us a bit of a background, headlines of, what is this new law then and what does it cover?
Yes, so it came in October 24 and essentially now says that employers have a duty to prevent sexual harassment. And really importantly, there's a distinction. So at the moment, they have a duty to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment. In October of this year, there'll be a duty to take all reasonable steps. And you might think, well, what's really the difference there? Yeah. But it all comes down to if there's an award tribunal, there can be a 25% uplift on what's already, a really significant, can be a really significant award if you haven't taken the steps. So at the moment, you could take what's viewed as some reasonable steps, and that might take away that 25%.
At least you made an effort type of
You've made an effort, You've got a policy in place. Maybe your training was a bit out of date, but you did the training. Yeah. Whereas from October of this year, if you haven't taken all the steps, if you haven't trained everybody, if you haven't refreshed the training every year, if you haven't got the right policy in place, you've not done a risk assessment, you've not considered what might happen when you're in alcohol-fueled social situations and taken that into your risk assessment, then that could see your award bumped up by 25%.
Now, in some of the stuff I read about it, it pointed out that this is one of the first times that there's been a preventative duty put upon managers. Now, that doesn't strike me. Is that true? Because surely risk assessments in the health and safety field are sort of preventative. You're supposed to look ahead and say that might happen, therefore I'm going to put this mitigation in place. Yeah. But this certainly was being explained that this, in this field, is unusual in that it's put, rather than just reacting to a complaint or a situation that's been reported, you now have to prevent it happening in the first place. Yeah. In all sorts of ways that you wouldn't have even thought about. Like you say, the alcohol-fueled, that sounds like it's a binge drinking event, doesn't it? A glass of wine after work could be enough for you to say, hang on a minute, we know what people can be like when they've had a glass of wine and they think they're being funny, but what do? Do you have to be there, witness it, call people out, not have it at all? I don't know quite what reasonable.
Yes, and that's the difficulty, isn't it, with a lot of employment law and sort of ACAS guidance. And if you look on the EHRC website, which has guidance about how companies can deal with these new laws around the prevention of sexual harassment, reasonable comes into it. So you've got to consider also the size of your business, what your budget is, the type of people you have in your business, what's the demographic like. So what your steps aren't going to look like the business next door's steps to you. But the distinction,
there's no cutout for SMEs. This duty applies to all businesses other than the reasonableness test or proportionality or whatever. But it's not like with certain health and safety laws where for smaller businesses, fewer than 10 people, you don't need a first aider or you don't need whatever it may be, or full risk assessments here and there everywhere. Whereas this does apply across the board from one employee upwards.
Yeah. And the fines are the same. If the EHRC comes in to investigate, the fines will be the same.
That's the Equality and Human Rights Commission.
But the tribunal is going to take into consideration what type of business you are, because that all goes down to what steps were reasonable. So they won't be the same for every business. So you can't expect PLCs or big multinationals to put in the same measures as...
But you can't imagine that what this means when it says preventative measures is that we just have to create a training course, make sure everybody's done it, signed a piece of paper, and therefore we've prevented it. That's not enough.
It's not enough. No, absolutely. No, you need to start. Well, I think it starts the risk assessment, is my opinion, and the HRC suggests so as well. So you do a risk assessment, breaking down, what are the potentials? So where can the risks actually occur? And certainly social events are going to come into that. And you can put measures around that. We talked a little bit about it actually last time I met with Richard on the podcast, because we talked a bit about Christmas socials, and that's about setting the expectations with people beforehand and not being afraid to remind people very clearly, this is what you don't do and this is what you do. And maybe putting a cap on alcohol, because you've got to remember that the company is, for something that somebody does, an employee does at a work event, the business becomes vicariously responsible for it. So if you're putting steps in place to mitigate anything that may potentially happen, then that's going to go in your favour as a reasonable steps defence, essentially. So it might be that you just pay for 2 drinks and say, that's it, we're only having 2 alcoholic drinks, or you have no alcoholic drinks. Or you make sure that at least one of the managers stays sober throughout, and they're the kind of policing the event. You draw carriages at a certain time of night and say, that's where our party ends. And then hopefully you can, sort of mitigate your vicarious liability for anyone that decides they're going to do the private party.
Even if you did that with the 2 drinks limit and say we're finishing at 7 o'clock, we go to the pub after work at 5:30, 7 o'clock's finished, and then everyone go home. If they don't and they stay out in their own capacity, there is still some liability on the employer because they caused the event to happen.
Potentially, but there is mitigation also.
Okay. Okay, so we have these duties on both managers and directors, and I guess because of that research showing that if 40+% of women have experienced it in the last year and 18% of men, then there was also talk in some of the material I read that if you haven't got a record of having actively intervened and challenged and a record of having done that, then you can't really be serious to say that we've been preventing it and taking all steps. Because surely you're not telling me that it's never happened before when the stats nationwide are so high.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the difficulty is that you can only deal with what you know about as well. So you've got to look at.
But you can't put your head in the sand. You can't say, I didn't look, therefore I didn't know.
No, but what I mean by that, is when you do your risk assessment or when you're sort of taking certain steps, if it's not being reported to or the business has a genuine lack of knowledge in a certain area, no matter what kind of processes they put in place to really analyse their risk, then again there's potential mitigation. But that should come out in your risk assessment.
If you do
really,
risk assessment,
yeah. And then it's about getting the right policy in place. I know policies are a bit boring. And
we did a whole episode on policies recently.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Well,
and especially in we decided to open it out beyond the obvious handbook type policies. We're talking about all the commercial policies. You have, your currency hedging policy, your stock holding policy. These are all policies: health and safety policy, environment policy. When people think about policies, they just think about the HR stuff. And this one, I think, is a classic one that isn't health and safety related so much. It's about much broader than just what you put in the employee handbook. This is about the way the business runs, its culture.
Yeah. Well, really importantly, and this goes to the policy and for training as well, avoid cookie cutter. Because that is not going to give you an all reasonable steps defence. There has been case law where judges have rejected that training was appropriate because it's been off the shelf. Right. So they've seen, and you can, there's a lot of online training. There's, that you can, and it might fit your business if you're lucky. It might be that it does cover everything that is pertinent to your business particulars, but it may not. Yeah. And if it doesn't, then that's not going to help you. So getting tailored training is important, and making sure that the policy isn't just one that you've downloaded from the internet or got ChatGPT to write it. Sure. It's actually something that makes sense to your business. And it covers third parties also. How would you interact externally? Because in October this year, staff will be able to raise claims against the business for sexual harassment by third parties. So previously, in the 24 legislation that came in, there was a duty to take steps to prevent it, but there wasn't the ability for staff to actually raise a claim for it. But that's going to change this year.
So that is part of what changes as well.
Yes.
Now I want to explore a bit about this third-party thing, because that is really taking it even more.
It's really
it wasn't
hard,
already a big step to say, right, proactively you now have to demonstrate that you've taken all reasonable steps, and then soon all reasonable steps to prevent, which means risk assessments on speed. You've got to really think about this through and take actions. And because of the prevalence of it, you've got to have some track record of showing that you've dealt with occasions where this has happened and deal with the alcohol events and all that sort of thing. Yep. So that, as if that wasn't enough, they're now extending that, is it October or something this year?
October this year.
To this third party thing. So what's that going to bring in?
Well, it's really difficult, isn't it? When you can't control people, essentially, like as much as just
even less the ones
you put in.
Employing,
but yes, your employees, you'd hope so, but third party, so that's really difficult. So again, it's about what's reasonable and what steps can you put in. So your risk assessment is going to look at where is your contact with your third parties. Are they customers? Are they suppliers? Are they contractors? What
delivery
does that
driver at the back door?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What does that look like? And then what kind of contact do your staff have with them? Are they alone? Are they going into offices on their own? Have you got female staff going in on their own particularly? And then what do you do about that? What measures do you put in? Have you got a lone working policy that ensures that people feel comfortable? Is there a buddying up system? Yeah. Have you got a process where you're vetting third-party suppliers or customers that you're getting into contact with? Are you communicating with third parties that you interact with to tell them what your expectations are in terms of sexual harassment? Yeah. So there are all of those steps that you can put into place. That doesn't mean that it won't happen, because as I said, we can't control people and their actions ultimately. But those are the sorts of steps that will be expected in terms of all reasonable steps.
And I guess in hospitality in particular, and certain other sectors like we talked about earlier, the higher risk sectors, that becomes phenomenally difficult to imagine. You're in a pub.
Yes.
So talk about alcohol fuel. It's not your employees now, it's the customers.
Yes.
And then some regulars, punter decides to...
Hundreds and hundreds, thousands that are coming through a pub that you won't have any prior contact with, or they may only come in for an hour and you'll never see them again. How do you, display your expectations, or set your expectations rather with them? So it might be sort of visual displays. People have signs that we don't expect. This is what we can't tolerate verbal abuse against staff, etc. That should include sexual harassment. Yeah. So signage, etc. And then extra vigilance from managers, and really importantly, reporting lines, very clear reporting lines, so that staff can make managers aware.
So that's all coming in October then, which just further enhances something, which I wonder if many companies have even caught up to the baseline of where we are at today.
Well, I know they haven't.
Well, we are one. We were just finding out about it and learning about it. Yeah, and you're dealing with it, I guess, all the time in your professional work.
Yeah.
So what advice can you give then, if somebody's listening to this and they haven't really taken steps on this before? Clearly engage you and get it all sorted and all that. But just as a headline, what are the top 3 things that you can start with?
Yeah, risk assessment, absolutely. So the risk assessment has to be the top one. I'd say training for all of your staff. Some companies are limiting training to just managers. I personally don't think that's enough. I don't think it's all reasonable steps, and to make sure that your training is also relevant to your business and that covers the risk areas for your business. So
does that mean you really need somebody internally or your outsourced version of that to be able to produce that training rather than just go online and find one?
Either or, yeah. So I deliver training, and I do, and online training that you can bespoke to businesses. But you don't necessarily need to come to somebody external. If you've got really good trainers in-house, they can do the research. EHRC has a lot of guidance on their ACAS also. So the information is there potentially, and someone in-house might be best placed to tailor the training to the specifics of your business operations. But
they've got to be knowledgeable around the subject. It's not a layman's topic, is it?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about the risk assessments as well, even on the health and safety side. Whilst it's easier these days to get a bit of a steer online, especially in office type environments, they tend to have lots of common risks that you might protect against. This is a different level of just to be able to have a go at this yourself as a generally competent manager is a bit daunting.
Yes, absolutely, because it is where do you start? Where are the risks? What does it mean, a risk? There are templates available. I can give a link that you could put under the podcast for anyone who wants to have it. Yeah, absolutely. But yes, it can be a bit daunting where to start, and I've had clients wanting to do that themselves, and then have come back and said, no, I'm really getting stuck here, and what does it actually mean? And then your risk assessment is going to inform a lot of those steps that you need to take as well, and will inform policy. And that would be the third one, is having a really robust policy in place, because even though they're dry and they're boring, but it all goes back to what does the policy say, isn't it?
Like it or not, it's what we as directors, especially in the Companies Act, but now increasingly managers in some of these acts, have duties to do. I just want to name check then the particular research and the law that we're talking about. So the law is the Worker Protection (brackets Amendment of Equality Act 2010 close brackets Act 2023). Snappy, eh? And then the research, what was that research? It was the Government Equalities Office Sexual Harassment Survey (brackets Fieldwork 2019 to 2020). So people might want to look up those directly just to see what all this is all about. And as you know, we've got Andrea here, and if you want to find your company, you just go to the bottom of the alphabetical list. Because it starts with a Z.
It does, yeah.
That's clever marketing. I don't know how I thought that.
It's so clever because, it's very confident. Because I'm not trying to be aardvark.
I don't need to be the A in the yellow pages. So ZAR HR, Z-A-R HR. And a name check to Kathy as well, who triggered this whole debate in our mind. So if you're more in the Gloucestershire area, then HR Champions is where Kathy works. So a few outlets for you there. And at the very least, go and do some Googling or ChatGPTing on it. And
absolutely. Go to the EHRC website.
EHRC website. Good prompt. Yeah. So give us some of those links then, Andrea, if you don't mind.
Yes,
we'll put them in the show notes.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that. And thank you for listening to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast. And as we say every week, if you think this has been interesting to someone else that you may know, either in your business or someone else's, please drop them a line or tell them in the pub. But in the meantime, good luck with your business.